It is a pleasant late morning somewhere in the dense forest many a day's march east of the Rhine River. After a long campaign, the Roman army marches back to their winter quarters on the western bank of the river. A gentle humming of the trees mixes with the monotonous sound of the marching Roman column. One of the centurions admires the vibrant colors of the leaves falling off the treetops. Then he squints his eyes to focus on the figures hiding behind the trees. The sound of tribal horns blast out through the forest as more and more clan warriors appear in the distance. The Roman soldiers in the vicinity drop baggage, preparing their shields. The battle is about to begin. It is early autumn of the year 16 BC. A host of Germanic warriors cross the lower Rhine River and launch a surprise attack on the Roman province of Gallia. But before they were able to scour the countryside, the Roman provincial governor swiftly marched his legionary force to check the barbarian incursion. The subsequent clash, however, resulted in humiliation for the Roman governor as the tribesmen ambushed and shattered his army, which barely escaped annihilation but had lost a prestigious legionary eagle. Ancient chroniclers seem to downplay this defeat, styling it rather as an embarrassment more than a real threat. But for Emperor Augustus, the Germanic raid exposed the vulnerability of Roman Gaul to external threats. He was well aware that securing the region from future raids was crucially important given its strategic and economic value. So he traveled north to personally evaluate the Roman defenses on the Rhine. Seeing that his previous strategy toward Germanic tribes was inadequate, Augustus set about a more direct approach. Within the next few years, the river was dotted with a number of castra built to oversee the border, and a total of 5 legions were relocated to strengthen the guard of northwestern Gaul. The second part of the emperor's plan was to be executed by his stepson, Nero Claudius Drusus, who was tasked with establishing strong bridgeheads east of the river, intended as forward defense against the barbarians. Despite being only in his mid-20s, Drusus got to be known as a competent administrator and a reliable commander, very popular among the rank and file. In spring of 12 BC, he prepared a large expedition force, roughly 2 legions strong, and sailed through the newly built canal, reaching the largely unexplored shores of the North Sea. On his expedition east, Drusus compelled a few tribes to become allies of Rome, using either diplomacy or the tip of Roman legionnaires' swords. By the end of the campaigning season, Drusus sailed the lower reaches of the Weser River. This was the furthest east into Germania that a Roman army had ever traveled at this point in time, an accomplishment that brought Drusus much-deserved fame and was commemorated on coins. Subjugating the Germanic tribes, however, was a thorough, many-year-long campaign, and with the first milder weeks of the year 11 BC, Drusus set out for another expedition across the Rhine, this time marching Roman legions along the river Lippe straight into the Germanian interior. Since Drusus had paid much attention to expanding military infrastructure in Germania, the Roman army advanced slowly, building supply depots and accommodations that would support the easterly route. By the last days of summer, Drusus had reached the banks of the Weser River. There, per hint of ancient chronicles, a swarm of bees descended upon the Roman marching camp. Behavior of these insects was treated with utmost respect, as the ancients saw them as winged messengers of the gods. It was deemed that the bees warned the Romans of impending danger, possibly even a defeat lying ahead. Drusus was a man of reason, yet even he could not underestimate the gravity of supernatural signals, especially in light of dwindling supplies and approaching winter. Hence, he gave an order to turn back and retreat to the winter quarters on the Rhine. The journey back west appeared to be smoother, even though it often led through dense woods and rough terrain. What troubled the Roman officers, though, were scout reports of the natives observing the Roman column from a distance. Suspecting the worst, Drusus urged his men to tighten their ranks and remain vigilant. Unsurprisingly, he didn't have to wait too long for the barbarians to strike. when the vanguard of the Roman marching column descended into a low-lying, constricted valley, the Germanic tribesmen rained down their missiles, darts, and stones upon the cramped enemy line. The Roman legionnaires undoubtedly felt the weariness of a long campaign, but it took more than a single surprise attack to break them. Well-armored and wielding large scutum shields, the Romans presented solid discipline that helped them to endure the ranged assault of the barbarians and eventually reached a forest clearing. But then, Drusus realized that Germanic war chiefs foresaw this glade the Romans marched into as their tomb, as a multitude of warriors chanted, crowding the tree line. The Roman force was almost entirely encircled by Cherusci and Sicambri, proud and fierce Germanic warriors. Emerging from the dense forest, the barbarians launched a number of attacks on the organized lines of Roman heavy infantry. It was a manner of battle Drusus did not want to fight, but now struggled to maintain discipline among his troops and withstand the ferocious attacks of the Germanic warriors. A bitter, hard-fought struggle ensued that took many hours. The screams of the wounded mixed with the cries of the attackers. Despite superior equipment and training, many legionaries perished, but for every fallen man, his comrade breached his position. The casualties among the tribesmen seemed even higher. Many wounded fled in panic, while the living struggled to avoid treading on the bodies of the dead. Despite losses, the Germanic warriors had a clear tactical advantage, with the enemy surrounded and suffering, even though the cost bled their numbers. Yet with every passing hour, the barbarian strikes were less ferocious. Some of them even withdrew. The reason behind this remains a point of debate among researchers who contest whether the Germanics spared the Romans out of contempt or were simply exhausted by the apparently unyielding Roman line. Whatever the reason, Drusus recognized the weakness of the enemy and, waiting for the right moment, ordered his troops to break through the blockade. Against the odds, the Romans narrowly escaped the slaughter, albeit many fell on the clearing or succumbed to their wounds shortly thereafter. By leading the battered Roman legions out of a hopeless encirclement, Drusus was hailed by his soldiers as Imperator, in recognition of his leadership skills. On their way back to the Rhine, the Romans left several encampments, providing tangible evidence that Drusus's campaign in Germania yielded results. He launched more campaigns east in the next 2 years, expanding the military infrastructure of the region and reaching as far as the Elbe River. He laid a solid foundation for Roman control over Germania, but alas, in the year 9 BC, known for taking unnecessary risks with his own life, Drusus fell off his horse, and after infection set in, he succumbed to his injuries a week later, merely half a year before his 30th birthday. The strong Roman presence in Germania, largely carved out by Drusus, lasted for the next 20 years, during which a succession of commanders was dispatched to advance his conquest, while Drusus's Germanic allies remained loyal for several years after his death, supplying troops for the Roman army. Drusus's achievements and legacy, however, were largely overshadowed by the calamity in Teutoburg Forest some 20 years later.